All right, Emil Cadlick here with FantasyNation.com. I'm really pleased to have Ray Flowers here. He's been full-time in fantasy sports for 19 years, and then he had some part-time before that. Definitely a pioneer of fantasy sports, so let's meet Ray Flowers. How you doing, Ray?
I'm good, Emil. Thanks for having me on. It's weird to think 2 decades. I don't think of myself as being an old fella or anything like that, but when you put it in the context of how long it's actually been, it's been a long time.
that's a great career. It says here you were born in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yep, correct. And it's so funny. My current home, I'm actually getting ready to move, but my current home right now is about, I think, 1.1 miles from the hospital where I was born. So
Wow.
when I came to, I've been here for about 10 years now. When I came back to the area, I found this home and I thought it was great, but I sent a note to my brother and I said, is it weird that I'm basically moving down the street? And we kind of got a chuckle out of it, but it's a great area here
That
in the suburbs.
that's an interesting. And your cat has a Twitter account.
He does, at the Dexter Kitty. He likes bacon and to cause harm to Ray Flowers. He likes to nap a little bit too.
Yeah,
But I
so
guess
what's
that's
the Dexter? Is that from the movie or the series, the TV series?
great question, Emil. But no, it's not. It's actually he was a street cat, and that was his name. So it was on his tag, and
Oh,
the owners were around the corner, and we returned him to them like 5 times, and they just said throw him out in the rain and all that kind of stuff. And he kept coming around, and they actually moved and left him. So
wow.
he became their cat, and we didn't change his name because he already had it.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty neat stuff.
Yeah.
So where did you go to college?
I went to multiple places. I went to College of San Mateo, junior college, for a couple of years. Then I took some time off, went and worked retail for a couple of years. I kind of got up to the management level of the local retail store and thought to myself, what am I doing? This is not what I want to do with the rest of my life. So I ended up going back to school. I did my undergrad at San Jose State and then my graduate work at the University of San Francisco.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That says that you started doing some part-time work while you were a graduate student in fantasy sports.
Yeah, I was at USF, and I had a girlfriend at the time that was going through some mental health issues. It turned out she was bipolar, and she didn't know it. I didn't know it. And so it was a really tumultuous time. So trying to balance that private part of my life, trying to balance the master's work in school, and it's like I just wanted to do something fun for me. And so I started writing, baseball and hockey kind of on the side, and I did it for free. I just basically wanted an avenue, and I hunt and pecked, and I think I sent out, I want to say 11 or 12, contact notes before someone said, yeah, we'll let you do something for free. And I said, oh, great. And so I did that for a couple of, 6 months, and then it was like, well, we'll pay you $200 if you want to do it for the next 6 months. And I said, sure. And then it was $500, and you know how that goes. So it just kept building and building until the point where it started to get a little substantial, I guess.
So I assume this was late 1990s, roughly?
Mhm. Correct? Yep.
What were the sites that you were working for?
Yeah,
Assuming it
it's
was
so
a
funny.
website.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, and it's so funny. There were so many of them. There was drafthelp.com and athomeplate.com. Those were the two that actually helped me kind of get started. Drafthelp.com, Rick Morris was a guy there. He was a great guy. He actually had a connection to one of the Cleveland radio stations, so he would do an event where once a year he would raise money for charity, and he would do a 24-hour straight thing. And so he had me on as a guest there a couple of times through the couple of years I was working with him. So I got a chance to do some radio work. I'd go on for like an hour, be a co-host, and do that. So that was kind of cool. But those were the first two spots that kind of gave me the opportunity before things got a little more substantial. The place that actually kind of gave me my real break was fantasyplanet.com. And this was back in the days where the internet was exploding and all that kind of new stuff. And this is a true story, Emil. I'm not making this up. There were two watermelon farmers that had the idea to buy domain names. And they went out and bought domain names. They bought couch.com, furniture.com, chair.com, michaeljordan.com. They bought everything. And amongst the properties they bought was fantasyhockey.com, fantasybasketball.com, fantasyfootball.com, fantasybaseball.com, fantasygolf.com, fantasynascar, blah, 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 blah. And so I was working part-time for the baseball side, fantasybaseball.com. And they said, well, we've got this property, fantasyhockey.com, but we don't have anything to put on it. We got to figure out a way to get this going. And I said, well, look, I'm a Sharks fan. I follow hockey a little bit. Let me give it a go. And so I worked with the developer to help put the site together. I ended up hiring a bunch of people to write for the site as well. And within about 3 weeks, it was all up and running. And the folks at Fantasy Planet said, well, hey, Ray, great job as a part-time employee getting a whole website working for us. You want a full-time job? And I had to make a choice because I was just finishing up. This was 1999. I was just finishing up my master's degree, and I was getting ready to go to get my PhD. And I thought to myself, well, they'll put me on a waiting list for a month or a year, They'll hold my spot. I'll try the fantasy thing for a year. If it doesn't work, I'll go back to school. And, here we are almost 2 decades later. It never got worse.
So 19 years later, you're still waiting to go back to get your master's degree, PhD.
Exactly. Don't know if I'm going to get it at this point, but it's always back.
What was your field?
Interestingly enough, I started out in administration of justice. I was thinking about going into police work. And through the process of going to school, I decided to study theology as a minor. And what actually ended up happening is I flip-flopped. So I got a minor in administration of justice. I was 1 semester away from, getting another bachelor's degree, but I just didn't have time for that. I ended up getting a bachelor's in comparative religious studies with an emphasis in Christianity. My master's in theology with an emphasis in scripture. So my plan was to be a teacher, to be a professor. On my mother's side, everyone teaches. My mom, my aunts, cousins, nephew, everyone teaches. That's what the family does. And so that was kind of what my goal was going to be a professor. And people ask me, what the hell does that have to do with what you do now? And of course, nothing directly. But all I did in grad school, the whole 2 years I was there, was give presentations and write papers. That's all you do. And what do I do every day? I sit there for 10 hours a day and I write. And then for 2 hours at night, I talk on the radio. So it really, even though it was totally a different field, really did help prepare me for what I do today.
Wow. And you are a teacher of fantasy sports.
I guess,
Many people.
Yeah, it kind of worked out that way, I guess, yeah.
That's a really good story. Now, later on, tell me about this daily racing form. I never really knew what that was. And when was that occurred?
Yeah, and people always say it's funny because I am proud of being 19 years full-time because it's a difficult industry, and there are not many people that have done it full-time for that length of time. A lot of people come in and out. They do it part-time. I've always been able to do it full-time. There were some periods of time where the full-time work was necessitating me working for 4 different companies at once. And at one period of time, that's what happened with the Daily Racing Form. It was one of I think 4 different companies I was working for at the same time. Daily Racing Form, which is like the oldest racing publication in the country, and anytime you go to a track, they're there. I mean, it's the Sports Illustrated of the racing world. They had an arm that also did newspapers for NFL and for college football, because they'd also have those at the track for people to pick up. And so while I worked for Daily Racing Form, I didn't do anything horse racing related. I'd be horrible at that. But I did do work for the college and the football newspapers that they featured at the racetracks.
So more, not necessarily fantasy, but information about the teams.
Yeah, that was straight reporting about the teams, correct. No fantasy.
Now, what time frame was this?
Gosh, I'd have to look it up to be sure, but I'm going to say that was probably 2003, 4, somewhere around that period of time.
Okay.
I could be wrong. It all might be 2006, 7, probably about 2006 or 7. Let me rephrase that. 2006 or 7.
Cool.
It was kind of before we kind of made that move to Fanball, which disappeared and now obviously has been resurrected.
So you were part of Fanball also, huh?
Yeah, I was part of Fanball as well. Fanball at one point. So we came in as a team. Ryan Houston was in charge of that, and we came in as a team. And I, at one point, was kind of managing everyone. Wow. I've done a lot of kind of everything you have to when you're working for small companies. As you know, it's one of those scenarios where
sure.
you do what needs to get done. I prefer to do my thing, and my thing is writing and content. I don't like the idea really of managing people because you're not in an office. You got to have 14 phone calls. You got to send 700 emails. It's just very tough. And it's also difficult, too, because so much of what we do in the fantasy universe is part-time when you talk about those kind of people. And it's juggling their schedules. And, hey, Ray, can you call me at 9 at night? well, that's great, but I'm on the West Coast. So is it midnight? It's a mess.
3.
So yeah, so at one point I was directly managing like the whole baseball staff, which was like,
Wow.
I think it was 39 people because we had bloggers for all the individual teams. Yeah,
39 people.
Yeah. So we had, I was directly managing that, and I was co-managing the football side. So technically it was like 75 people. And I finally went to Ryan. I said, I can't do anything other than manage these people. I mean, I've written 2 articles this week. So we ended up, putting it out and kind of separating things. And it was fun because back in that day, we had an individual team for each, individual reporter for each team. And, Knox Bardeen, who covers the Falcons now, actually, we gave him a job covering the Falcons back then.
Wow.
Saris, we hired Howard Bender. Like, there are a lot of people now in the industry that were part of that, blog community. But we did that at Fanball for a few years, and that actually kind of led directly toward my opportunity that affords me the ability now to talk on the radio with SiriusXM.
Cool. Now, you did some Rotowire and some FantasyAlarm also?
Oh, yeah. I was at Rotowire, was one of those companies where we're piecing together the part-time stuff.
Yeah.
Over there, a great group of guys, Shannon and Chris and Jeff, all the guys over there always treated me well, gave me an opportunity to write, and kept me relevant as I was trying to piece things together there. So kudos to them, great group over there. And then the FantasyAlarm crew it was that period of time after Fanball kind of slowed down and eventually it closed. I was doing the radio work on SiriusXM in the evenings and piecing together the writing. I was working for Rotowire and for FantasyAlarm at the same time at one point. And eventually Al Williams and Jeff Manns over at FantasyAlarm said, Ray, we want to bring you in full time. Took a little negotiating because, the salaries are always a little up in the air there, but we were able to meet in the middle and figure that out. And, Jeff and I kind of helped spearhead things for FantasyAlarm for a few years. Went really well there. Love all those guys over there. They're doing great now. And that led to the opportunity now where I'm currently at with, Elite Sports.
Yeah, with Jeff Mann.
Correct.
He is funny. He's fun to listen to.
He is. He's got a big ego, but it's okay. Jeff's a great guy. I think a lot of people, you get a perception about someone, like people think I'm obnoxious because sometimes I'm a little gruff with callers. People think Jeff is a Yahoo because he says outlandish things at times. But Jeff's a great guy, very knowledgeable, way more knowledgeable, I think, than people give him credit for, actually.
He understands the entertainment part of the business.
And it's such a huge key.
It's information and it's entertainment. And Bob Harris and I talk about that a lot. You got to keep them entertained and provide information for them, and then you got them. I watched his, what's it called, when he drives to get a cup of coffee.
Oh. Drinking fantasy sports coffee. I don't know what he calls it.
Periscope. I was watching it on Periscope. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Another entertainment. Entertainment part of it. So you've been working there a while. Now, we mentioned Sirius. You're like the takeover Twitter guy at Sirius, plus a bunch of other things. Tell us about that.
Yeah. One of the things I guess I'm good at is doing things fast. Whether they're good or not, but I can do them quickly. And so back in the day, they kind of realized that, and I was one of the early people on the channel that was really successful with Twitter and had a lot of interaction with people. So during the football season, every week, I get up at 6:30 in the morning every Sunday because I have to start at 7 o'clock on the West Coast. And then I do from 10 to 1 Eastern time, I answer the Twitter questions. So I do that for 3 hours, then I watch the games all day, and then I'm on in the evening. So my Sundays are like 17 hours all NFL season, but been fortunate enough to be the main person on those Sundays for SiriusXM Fantasy, doing that from 10 to 1. I've also done it a bunch of times during the baseball season where you'll just come on at some point, what have you, and hey, we're taking questions on this Wednesday. Ray will do it for us. So they've been very gracious and allowed me the opportunity there. And in terms of the radio, I mentioned that when I was in grad school, I get presentations and the family teaches, and then you kind of jokingly said, well, Ray, you're teaching now. So I guess I can transition what I'm thinking to a verbal form that makes sense. And so I always said to my boss, Ryan Houston, when we were working together at Fanball, I said, look, everyone's kind of doing this podcast thing. I'd love to do it. Let's let's, half hour a day, whatever, let's do it. And he went out and found, Ryan did, Kyle Elfrink. And Kyle has the advantage of being different than so many people in the fantasy industry, including myself, that even are on SiriusXM today, is that he's a radio guy. Kyle went to school for that. He studied that. He went to Mizzou, and he worked with Jack Buck. Kyle really was he was on ESPN radio for a decade before we started working together. And they brought Kyle in, and Kyle and I did a 4-day-a-week, 1-hour podcast, just talking whatever. We just rambled on. Blog Talk Radio was where we were at the time. And Sirius kind of contacted Ryan and said, hey, we're putting shows on. We're trying to get a channel together. What do you think? And so we had some meetings, and I'm positive the reason we got the job was because Kyle was a radio guy. It wasn't because I was some great analyst. It was Kyle was a radio guy.
Well, it's nice to have an MC who, has a professional voice and understands how to, read little things and, go in and out of stuff. So that helps.
Oh, so much. It's unbelievably difficult to do. And everyone thinks it's easy until they try. Like I've had the opportunity, because I've been there now about 9.5 years with Sirius since the first day of the channel. It's been a great run, and I've had the opportunity when Kyle's been sick or on vacation or when they've needed to fill in to be the host. And as the analyst, as my traditional role, I'm 100% comfortable. You flip the radio switch on, I'm good to go. Doesn't matter if I know what we're talking about. Let's just go. As a host, like I'm nervous the whole time. It's like I got to hit the post, you got to read the read, you got to bring the callers in, and it's so difficult to do it in a seamless way. And Kyle is the best at it. He's absolutely the best at it. So we kind of have a running gag where I always say, the only reason I had success in this area, Kyle, was because of you. And then he comes back at me and says, the only reason I'm still doing this, Ray, is because you're so good at what you do. So it's a great partnership that we're going on almost 10 years on the channel, and we had a year before that at FanBall.
It works great. You got both things there, and I personally really like to listen to shows where there's two people. I don't know why, because you can BD things off of each other, and maybe a little discourse of I have a different opinion, and here's why I like the here's why, and of course the entertainment of two guys kind of jawing it out occasionally, not over the top like ESPN does, but just kidding. But yeah, that sounds like a great now. So you were at Sirius Fantasy Sports XM Radio. Of course, it probably wasn't XM at the time. What was the first job you did, or the first things you did when you got there?
Yeah, they threw us into the fire and said, "Go."
You had a show. You had a show right then. Boom.
First day. Yeah, back at that time, there was very little social media at all, because Sirius was operating kind of as, let's do this fantasy thing because we know people love it and it's great, but we're not going to treat it any differently than if it was, The Bridge or something like that. So we didn't have social media, we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have blog. It was just, we didn't have videos, it was just do the show. And so from day one, now we're all shortened. We have 2-hour shows pretty much across the board anymore. Sometimes people do an hour here and there. Back at the start, it was 3 or 4 hours. Wow. So we had 3 hours from the start. We had a 5-day-a-week show. We literally started again. It was a Wednesday. It was the first day of the channel. And again, that's all Kyle, I'm sure, because they knew they could trust him to do the necessary things and not make a fool of them. And we just went. And it's been, like I said, it's been a great ride. Since then, we added the Twitter component, like we talked about. I've done video work for them, short little videos that they throw up on social media. Last year, for baseball season, I was on Facebook doing a half hour a couple times a week there, doing the video chat with people. So they've really expanded things.
Yeah, did you get a lot of people asking questions on Facebook?
Yeah, yes and no. I think the difficult thing and you probably run into this too, Emil, is that there's East Coast, there's West Coast. When are people off? Are they available at lunch? Is it the morning? Is it the evening? Well, when it's the evening, like our show is called the Fantasy Drive on SiriusXM. When we started, it was 5 to 8 Eastern, which is the drive, right? The East Coast Drive. It's 2 to 5 West Coast. So calling it the drive, if you're listening in LA, you're like, what the hell are these people talking about? It's 2 to 5, right? So I think it's always difficult to find that right sweet spot. We've all searched for it. Sometimes it's 1 o'clock Eastern, sometimes it's 4 o'clock Eastern, sometimes it's 9. So I think it's always a moving target that at least the people I've worked with have never quite pinned down how to always consistently reach the most people.
So what's your show called now?
called the Fantasy Drive, and it's very confusing. It's Monday through Friday, but the times are different on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's 8 to 10 right now Eastern time, and then on Fridays it's 10 to 12. During football season, we pick up a 6 show, and we're on Sundays, and that time always changes. It's in the evening as well.
That's Sunday night.
Yeah, Sunday night. Usually it's like 7 to 10 or something like that Eastern.
Now, you
But
going
yeah,
you going 52 weeks a year, or is there any break for that?
it's so funny. 52 weeks a year, yeah, and people will come back and they'll say, "Oh, it's great to have you back," and it's like, we've been here the whole time, because people
You may have left, but we didn't.
they don't listen to baseball or football or whatever it might be. But yeah, it's been 52 weeks the entire time. And I don't know this for certain, but I'm fairly convinced that I actually have more hours than anyone on the channel, because we've done 6 days a week the whole time. I do know that I hold the record. I was on for one day for 11 hours.
I saw that.
There were multiple hosts that were missing, and they're like, "Ray, can you?" I go, "I can talk for 11 hours." So
what was it, Thanksgiving or something?
no, it was a normal day. Yeah, that's the weird thing. It wasn't even a holiday. It was. I don't remember year 2 or 3, so it's kind of early on. But Matt Deutsch, the program director, would check in. "Okay, Ray, can you do the next show?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's just talking, guys. I'm drinking Gatorade. I'm good." But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and they kind of threw me to the wolves and said, "Have at it." And I've always been appreciative to Matt Deutsch and Rob Touzé in particular for having the confidence in me when, hey, I was a fantasy guy, but I wasn't a radio guy. So that support from them has always been a lot to me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That first week, that first day, I forget, obviously, Steve Cohen and Matt Deutsch around then?
Yeah, they were in charge of it. Steve brought Matt in to run our station. I hadn't met Steve at that time yet. It was into the run of actually doing the show before I got to meet Steve. But another guy, obviously, without him supporting Matt and us, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And I think it's just great, because I know on social media now, I've seen it lately in particular, there's all these conspiracy theories, like, the man's telling you what to do or how to act, and it's like, no one from Sirius has ever censored us, has ever told us not to talk about things, has ever said you have to say this or that. They've always given us the freedom to say what we believe, and that, I think, is kind of unique. We've never been steered in a direction.
When did I didn't hear about these conspiracy theories. Who's just fans?
It's just out on social media, because we all know this. Football drives the bus. It just does. Yeah. On TV, on the radio, that's the way it works. And during baseball season, we always get the pushback from the baseball folks that, there's some conspiracy going on. Sirius is trying to push out baseball, or some football companies paying them money to talk about the combine. It's like, guys, Sirius is a service provider. If you, as someone using the service, say you want something, they give it to you, or they go out of business. So I've never understood that part of it.
It's called listening to the customer.
If you don't do it, you lose, right? You know that. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're knowing what the customer wants. And so, I mean, obviously you want to cover the combine and stuff like that. So back to before you were going to college and whatnot, when did you ever, when you were a kid, did you like certain sports, and when did you finally hear about this fantasy sport thing?
Yeah, I'm 46 now. And so it was kind of in high school I started hearing about it. Didn't really start playing until college. I'll get back to that in a second. I grew up playing baseball and basketball full time. And people may not believe it when they see me now, but I'm about 6'4", 175.
Wow, okay.
I'm like Chris Sale. But when I was a sophomore in high school, as an example, I was 6'2", 210. I was much bigger when I was in high school. Yeah, the football coach always wanted me to play. They're like, "Ray, we'll add 20 pounds. We'll put you at tight end. You'll be great." I never wanted to do that. Between my junior and senior year, I lost 20 pounds. I have no idea why. None. I didn't change anything about my lifestyle. Didn't change it. I lost 20 pounds. I came back my senior year of high school. All of a sudden, I could dunk. I could reverse dunk. I could two-hand dunk because I took a 20-pound weight off my shoulders, and all of a sudden, I could jump. I was good at basketball. I was better at baseball. And it's a long story, and I won't bore you or the listeners. My dad had a car accident when I was in high school, and it was a very traumatic experience. It was a very traumatic experience for me and the family, and so sports wasn't important anymore. So growing up, all I did was play baseball. And when I wasn't playing baseball, I played a little basketball, but baseball was my thing. I physically carried around a baseball encyclopedia when I was a kid, the big Rand McNally, like 14 pages. I was the kid that would be like, oh yeah, Dale Murphy hit 44 home runs in 1987. Like I just knew this stuff because I was all baseball all the time. I went away from it. I mentioned going to junior college. I backed out of four-year college because of the family stuff, and then took the time off because of that too. So there was a long period of time where I wasn't anti-sports, but I kind of started to fall away from it. And when I started coming back, fantasy baseball and fantasy sports were there. So what I did was I said, hey, to my friends I grew up with, let's start a fantasy baseball league. Why not? And they said, oh, that sounds great. So I think I was 19, 20, right around that age. We started playing the fantasy baseball. And that was at a time where the internet wasn't a thing. I had no idea what an Excel spreadsheet was. In fact, the only time we got the full stats was on a Sunday. The San Francisco Chronicle, the local newspaper, carried Giants and A's stats every day. But it didn't carry all of baseball until Sunday. So the Sunday sports section was huge because there was like 2 full pages of team stats. So on Sundays, I'd get the Sunday paper, and I'd go and I'd sit in the office, and I'd pull my pencil out and my calculator, and I'd sit there for 3 hours and put together the stats for the entire league by hand, and send them out to everyone. And so there were 6 of us when it started, and then it kind of grew from there. And so yeah, it was back right as I was 19, 20 where I finally got involved, and it was through the fantasy baseball game.
And that was what time frame was that when you started that league?
So I was 19 or 20 years old, so that would be right about 1990, 91, 92, right around there, 93.
Well before the internet.
Yeah, well before. And so it was a lot. And I tell the kids today, you have it so good. You just click your button and all the stuff is done. I'm the guy that used to have to sit there for hours on a Sunday hand collating data. The world's changed a little bit.
Yeah, there was actually a lot of businesses back in your time frame that ran leagues, and you had to call in, and they had a touch-tone system to change your lineup or to put bids in.
Yep.
I've got my old magazines. I started in 1990, and sometimes I'd flip through one from 92 or 93, and I'm like, all these companies that were advertising, I'm going to have to go through and look at them again. It's pretty funny. But so that pre-internet, there was definitely commissioner tools.
I remember seeing those in the sporting news all the time. Yeah, Baseball
crazy.
Weekly at the time. CDM back in. I saw all those things before I really knew what they were. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of contests in the newspapers and that too in that time frame. It's interesting how early there were. I think there was actually contests in newspapers in the 80s, and of course in the 80s there was a few people like Cliff Charpentier and a few others that did fantasy books, where a book would come out in March about and of course it's extremely old at the time, but that was actually a product before you hit 1990, which is crazy.
Yeah, I still have. I was just looking at my shelf. I still have my Bill James abstracts from the 80s and stuff on the shelf.
There we are. There's one of the big ones too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, this is a great story. Anything else that? Oh, wait, you did get a lot of awards in FSWA. You got some baseball series.
Years ago, when people say, "Hey, send us a bio," you never know what to put on it. I mean, but yeah, I've baseball series of the year a couple times, and that's great.
That's big. That's great that you got those.
Yeah, I'm proud of that. Not that that's not a goal these days. I think I'm just doing other things. So I've really tried to, let me say that in a better way. I've really tried to find my voice as a writer, and it's been a long journey. I think some people are gifted. I remember the name Ted Carlson, who used to work with me at Fanball. The guy was the greatest writer I think I've seen in fantasy. He was fantastic. He was slow. He was on the slower side. Like, he wasn't cranking out articles every 10 minutes. But when Ted wrote an article, you had to read it. It was fantastic. There were witty aphorisms in it and phrase. It was just great. And I've never been that good of a writer. I mean, my key is I think I can take complex things, say it simply, and do it quickly. But I'm not some fanciful writer. I could never write a sonnet or put together some nonfiction. I just can't. I mean, some fiction work, I can't. It's just not me. So I was proud of those awards because it felt a little bit of vindication for the part of me that I thought, I'm not really great at that. So it was nice to get that little pat on the back because I try to be self-critical. And again, I think that's one of the things I'm continually striving to get better at.
Well, that's good that you're striving to get better. And also, I think, You are probably a pretty darn good writer if you get an award like that, because there's a lot of competition. I'm the vice president of the Writers Association. I've been since we started it, and there's lots of articles that come in every year for those. So you got to outperform a lot of people in those. So that's fantastic. Anything else you want to bring up that I haven't mentioned that's off the top of your head?
Oh, I just want to say thank you for having me on. I don't know if I'm worthy of being included in the series, but I appreciate the opportunity, and it's fun to do stuff like this. I do so much, radio work and so much work just not involving a camera. So it's kind of strange to be looking at a camera, kind of a nice, different way to do it. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for giving me the chance, and I appreciate it. And it means something to me to have someone like you want to include me in this. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, and I've got a lot to do. I don't know when we hit April. Late April. I'm gonna have to probably stop for a while till July, since preparing for football is going to take my time. But just came up with the idea a couple of years ago, and I decided, I really need to do this, because I think getting a lot of these people, and hopefully we can get a lot, maybe 50, 100 people,
right,
and have a really nice historical perspective of how fantasy became and the people that did it. So hopefully I can get a lot more too. But thank you.
Great idea. You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you much.